my channel, The Fancy Hat Lady Reads. I am wearing one of my fancy booktube hats, and it is time for my anticipated SFF releases of July through December 2026. Meow. Meow. Disclaimers. As always, all information is subject to change at any time at the discretion of the publisher. Also, inclusion of a book on this list is not a promise that I will personally ever read or review it. I choose the books that I feature here based on my personal interest in them, but it is intended as a resource for you. Now, I'm going to cheat a bit right out of the gate here because I have not one, not two, but 3 titles that were released on June 30th, the last day of June, that I missed including in my January through June video. One of them I had thought was a July title, and I was wrong. The other 2 I have no excuse for. The one I had thought was a July title, either because it initially was and it got pushed up, or because Goodreads just misled me and was wrong, is Mossed in Space by Rebecca Thorne. This is the first in a series, and it is cozy sci-fi about a woman who buys an abandoned starship that turns out to be possessed by, like, sentient moss. Now, here's the thing. I know this is queer, and I am, like, 90% certain that there's a romance in here somewhere because it's published by Bramble, which is supposed to be a romance imprint. But I have no idea whatsoever from the book description who the love interest is. There are like 3 people mentioned aside from the protagonist. There's an ex-girlfriend, there's the alien who used to own the starship, and there's the moss. Which one of them is the love interest? I have absolutely no clue. I kind of hope it's the moss. My next June 30th release is The Loom Tree by Angela Mi-Young-Her. This is the same author who wrote Folklorn, a book that is still on my TBR. This is her 2nd novel, and this is published by Erewhon. This is another Korean-inspired contemporary fantasy. I think this is about a teenage Korean-American girl who discovers her mother's diary and learns that her mother went to some sort of magical university. And then my 3rd June 30th release that I missed in my first video of the year is The Feywild Job by C.L. Polk. Now, this is a Dungeons & Dragons tie-in novel, so it would normally not be something that would make my anticipated releases list at all, given that I don't read a lot of media tie-in novels and I have never played D&D. However, C.L. Polk is an author who I have been a completionist reader of. I've read all of their published books so far. I think that's 5 books. And I feel like I've probably absorbed enough secondhand knowledge of D&D to manage this. I will probably at least get it out from the library and give it a try. It's supposed to be a cozy fantasy romance. How hard can it be to understand? It's also supposed to be a heist, and this is published by Random House Worlds. Okay, moving on to actual July releases. July 14th, we have The Eye of Leviathan by M.A. Carrick. M.A. Carrick is the author duo comprised of Marie Brennan and Alec Helms. They previously wrote the Rook and Rose trilogy together, which I did not read, but this one specifically has my interest. This is alternate history, Spanish Golden Age, where they are colonizing Fairy. I think the 2 main characters are changelings. One of them is the fairy in the mortal world, and the other is the human in Fairy. I am so sold on that premise. Another historical fantasy on July 21st from Red Hook, we have The Witch Below the Dreaming Wood by H.G. Perry. I still haven't read anything else by H.G. Perry after reading and liking The Magician's Daughter, but I keep having her books on my radar every time she publishes a new one. I think this is Arthurian, and it's set in Wales during World War II. Those were my only 2 books on this list for all of July. Is July a slow publication month this year? Moving on to August, on August 4th, we have A Trade of Blood by Robert Jackson Bennet. This is the 3rd book in the fantasy mystery detective series that started with The Tainted Cup, which won the Hugo Award last year and was followed by A Drop of Corruption, which I have just read because it's nominated for the Hugo this year. I have a full written review on Goodreads of that second book, but I will get around to filming a video version of that eventually. I have slightly complicated feelings about this series, but I'm not mad at the Hugos for making me read them. I am curious about book 3. And the publisher for this one is Del Rey. Next, on August 18th, we have The Divine Gardener's Handbook, or What to Do If Your Girlfriend Accidentally Turns Off the Sun by Eli Snow. That is quite a title, and this is quite a cover. Like, if there's a book on this list that I've been swayed into including based on the cover alone, it's this one. This is from Saturday Books, which is a newish imprint. I haven't read anything they've published yet, but I believe they're trying to be a new adult imprint. This appears to be a queer, sapphic fantasy dystopian with some kind of weird-looking world-building elements. I think the protagonist is a gardener who, like, fakes her way to winning a gardening competition and gets, like, elevated to the higher echelons of society, as is wont to happen in a dystopian novel. I don't know how interesting this is actually going to be, or if it's just going to be like a cookie-cutter dystopian with some fancy trappings. But the description does say, The Divine Gardener's Handbook is perfect for readers who like their fantasy weird, heartfelt, and a little unhinged, and I fear that is me. On August 25th, from Bramble, we are getting Daggerbound by T. Kingfisher, which is the long-awaited sequel to Swordheart. Long-awaited if you read Swordheart back when it was indie published. If you picked it up when it got the Trad Pub release, you have had much less of a wait. This is a fantasy romance series set in her world of the White Rat. Each of the books will feature a love interest who has been magically trapped inside a sword. The first book, if I recall correctly, references 3 of these swords, so I expect that the series will eventually be 3 books. Unlike the first book, this is an romance, and the protagonist is someone we've met before if you've read the Clocktower War duology. This is the return of Learned Edmund as a romance protagonist. Wow, he's come so far. I do have a review of the Clocktower War duology on this channel. You probably want to read both those books and Swordheart before reading this one, is my guess. And so it strikes me as a little odd that while these books are now getting released to great fanfare with hardcovers with sprayed edges, the Clocktower War duology are still indie published in the US. Like, they have a fancy new Trad Pub release in the UK, but not over here. Learned Edmund was a side character who started off those books like intensely unlikable to the point of being like a comedically terrible character. But he came a long way in those books and he got a lot better by the end. I am so hyped for this. Like, the Clocktower War duology were really not my favorite T. Kingfisher books. But I'm all for bringing back some of those characters. I think that's very fun. Also on August 25th from Orbit, we have The Art of Charming a Changeling by Sylvie Cathrall. This is the author who wrote the Sunken Archive duology, A Letter to the Luminous Deep, and A Letter from the Lonesome Shore. I liked A Letter to the Luminous Deep. I haven't read the second book yet. This is described as a cozy romantic fantasy. It's apparently about an art conservator who discovers that there's a fairy trapped in a painting, like in the Royal Art Gallery. Moving on to September 1st is a book that I have some mixed feelings about, but I'm including it anyway. This is Engines of Reason by Adrian Tchaikovsky. This is a sequel to Elder Race, which was a novella. Elder Race was the first book by Adrian Tchaikovsky I ever read, and it's still like maybe one of my favorite things of his I've read. I have found, however, that like the more Adrian Tchaikovsky I read, and he's very prolific, the less and less I care for his books. I think he rehashes the same themes a bit too much, and his books just aren't always that good. That said, I have a personal soft spot for Elder Race because of how much I liked it when I read it. It's set in a world that from one of the two POV perspectives seems like high fantasy, but from the other, you know that it's really science fiction with a regressed society and technology that seems like magic. And I really enjoyed both of those characters and how they related to one another. So I am really tempted to pick up the sequel, and I will be disappointed if it lets me down. And this is published by Tor.com. Next, on September 8th, from Tor Books, we have Wickhills by Premee Mohamed. This is novel length. I know Premee Mohamed has written a lot of novellas, but this is a full-length novel. And I know very little about it except that it's a fantasy espionage book. On September 8th from Amulet Books, we have the first YA title on this list, and that is Traitor's Nest by Frances Hardinge. I will note I'm putting it here in September 8th because that's when the US release from Amulet is happening, but this is actually coming out a little bit earlier in August in the UK. This seems so weird. The weirder you tell me a Frances Hardinge book is, the more I think I'm going to like it, because my favorite book of hers is A Face Like Glass, which is her weirdest book I've read. This is apparently about a world where the gods move castles across the landscape like they are chess pieces. I have pre-ordered this one. I'm really hyped. September 8th seems to be a big release day this year because that was my second September 8th book, and then I have two more. The next is Massif by Garth Nix, which is an adult science fiction novel. I may be a little less hyped about this than I think some of my friends and followers are gonna be, because I've been lukewarm on the last couple of Garth Nix books I've read. But I think this is his adult debut, and I am just really curious at what people are going to think of this, because he's definitely been on my mental list of like YA authors I think could make the jump to adult really well. I would not have expected sci-fi from him. I'm curious. The publisher for this is Harper Voyager. And then the last book on my list for September 8th is An Empire in the Clouds by Jiang. This is from Titan Books. This is described as a Chinese-inspired science fantasy. I don't know if it's at all related to her novella duology, which were also described as science fantasy. I have the first book. Those are the Natural Engines novellas. The first book was A Palace Near the Wind. I have that book. I haven't read it. Anyways, no indication here that they are connected, but except for the fact that they're both described as like Chinese-inspired science fantasy. This one is described as being set on a drowning continent full of corruption and deception and strange technology. Eventually, I'm gonna have to read something by Jiang. Moving on to September 15th, we have Bodies of Magic by Freya Marske, which is from Tor Books. This is supposed to be like a medical dark academia fantasy, like it's about magical healers at like fantasy medical school. And on the big exam day, someone turns up dead and the students have to solve the murder. Also on September 15th is a pretty big mainstream release that I'm kind of proud of myself for even being aware of, because I don't tend to know when like mainstream non-SFF imprints are coming out with books that are actually SFF. They surprise me by just existing one day. But this is Exit Party by Emily St. John Mandel, which is being published by Picador. Now, I still haven't read anything by Emily St. John Mandel. Station 11 is literally one of the books that I have owned unread for the longest. I always meant to read it. I was sure I was gonna love it, and then the pandemic happened and I kind of lost my ability to enjoy any sort of plague book for years. I think I might be back in a place where I can maybe read a plague book. Maybe I'll read Station 11. I've also heard great things about Sea of Tranquility, a book that I did not know was happening until it showed up one day and everyone else knew about it. I think this is a near future science fiction set in a world where America has just collapsed, or like splintered, broken up or something. Moving on to October, on October 6th, we have a new Nghi novel. It's called The Scarlet Ball, and it's being published by Tor Books. This is another one I have already pre-ordered. This is apparently like a gothic Gilded Age thing. I am absolutely certain this is going to be fantastic. The one thing that has me a little nervous, this doesn't say in the description that it's a retelling of anything. Like, The Chosen and the Beautiful was a retelling of The Great Gatsby that I never read because I'm not particularly a fan of The Great Gatsby. But this says that this does for Edith Wharton what The Chosen and the Beautiful did for F. Scott Fitzgerald. And I don't know what Edith Wharton book this would be. The only Edith Wharton I've actually read was Ethan Frome, which I had to read in high school. And I absolutely hated that. And then I've also seen a stage adaptation of The House of Mirth, which is such a downer. I guess I don't really know what Edith Wharton is actually best known for, and if she wrote anything that wasn't horribly, horribly depressing. I don't know. I've just decided after City in Glass that I just trust Nghi. She can write anything. Also on October 6th, also from Tor Books, is A Wall Is Also a Road by Annalee Newitz. The premise of this is just so cool. This is apparently about like a shape-shifting alien slime mold who is a biology grad student who goes to a backwater planet to study the creatures there, except this backwater planet is Earth and it's ancient Pompeii. Also, this is Balbuso Twins cover art and it is just so beautiful. I am kind of nervous about this though because I also thought the premise of Automatic Noodle sounded absolutely incredible. That's Annalee Newitz's novella that I just read because it's nominated for the Hugos this year. I thought Automatic Noodle was kind of underwhelming. Anyways, I hope this is better than Automatic Noodle. One more October 6th release. This is my second YA title in the list. This is Children of Owl by Darcy Little Badger. The publisher is Levine Carrido. This is another Indigenous contemporary fantasy. I'm sold. On October 13th, simultaneously from Harper Voyager in the US and Hodder and Stoughton in the UK, big deal release for the science fiction fans, As You Wake, Break the Shell by Becky Chambers. This is her new novel. This is not connected to any of her previous books. It is a whole new thing, apparently the start of a duology. I heard her read from this at Worldcon last year in Seattle, and she talked about it a bit and described it, I think, as significantly darker than some of her previous stuff, so don't necessarily expect it to be cozy, but it does look like it will be hopeful. Next, on October 20th, we are getting another one of these like itty-bitty tiny little Susanna Clarke short stories in itty-bitty hardcover format like The Wood at Midwinter was. And this is going to be The Bishop of Durham Attempts to Surrender the City. Now, I know that The Wood at Midwinter had previously been produced in like audio format for radio in the UK. I don't know if this story has previously been available anywhere or not. If you know, please tell me. It matters for Hugo Awards eligibility. Of course, we all want another novel from Susanna Clarke, but we will take short stories if that's what we can get. Next, on October 27th, is Code and Codex by Yoon-Ha Lee. This is another one where Goodreads seems confused about the publication date. I don't know about other countries, but in the US, it is currently on pre-order for October, so that's what I'm going with. This is an adult novel from Yoon-Ha Lee. I'm not sure exactly where it's going to fall on the science fiction fantasy spectrum. It seems like it's going to be a return to the sort of world building he was doing with the Machineries of Empire, where like it was a universe that operated on entirely different rules and kind of explored an evil empire through that context. Except instead of like the calendrical system of the Machineries of Empire, this is apparently based on language. So I think Machineries of Empire fans are very, very excited about this release. And I liked that series enough that I am also excited. This is from a different publisher in the US though. This is Saga Press. Oh, I think maybe the UK edition is from Solaris, and that's going to have a publication date next year. So you might have to wait for this a little longer if you're in the UK. Also on October 27th, we have a Tor.com novella that has piqued my interest. This is The Killing of a Chestnut Tree by Oliver K. Langmead. This is the same author who wrote Calypso, which was a science fiction novel in verse that I didn't read when it came out, but I'm still very curious about. And from everything I've heard about that book, this seems just so totally different that I did a double take on that author name. This is the start of like a cozy queer fantasy mystery series. This is about a gay couple who I think are an established couple, so it's not a romance. One of whom is like a famous detective, so together they solve crimes, but like secretly some of the crimes they solve are magical crimes. And this is apparently a murder mystery where the murder victim is a magic tree. Moving on to November, I only have one book on this list for November, and I am really not that certain that it's actually happening in November, to be honest, because we don't have a cover yet. And that is, to me, kind of an indication that maybe a book is gonna get pushed back if we're within 6 months and there's no cover. But as of March of this year, the author was reaffirming the November 26th UK release date in a blog post on their website, and it is available for pre-order in the UK, so I'm keeping it in the video. This is The Animals We Became by Finn Longman. The current release date we have is November 26th in the UK from Galance. The US release will presumably be at some later date from Erewhon. We don't have a date for that yet. This is the same author who wrote The Wolf and His King, which I read earlier this year and really enjoyed. It scratched an itch for like a classic fairy tale retelling that I hadn't read anything that quite did that for me in really way too long. And this is another retelling, but it's a Welsh mythology retelling. So whenever this actually happens, and especially whenever it comes out in the US, I will be very interested. Anyways, for December, I also only have one title, so this is the last book on this list. On December 1st from Tor Books, we are getting Call Me Traitor by Everina Maxwell. This one is fantasy romance, not science fiction, so not related to her previous two books. This is apparently a sapphic romance with high stakes and adventure. And that's it, that's the end of my list. Is there anything on this list you're particularly looking forward to? Let me know in the comments. Also, let me know if there's anything you're super pumped for in the second half of the year that didn't make my list. Anyhow, I hope you're having a very nice day. That is all. Bye for now.